She had a flat tire, but what the poor boy did next melted the millionaire's heart. The rain had started just before sunset, a quiet drizzle that turned the empty highway into a long ribbon of shimmering gray. Luxury cars rarely broke down here, but tonight, one had. Victoria Hale stood beside her sleek black car, staring at the flat tire with growing frustration. Her phone had no signal. Her driver had taken the night off. And the nearest town was miles away. Perfect, she muttered, folding her arms as the rain began to fall harder. Victoria wasn't used to this. As one of the wealthiest businesswomen in the country, problems were usually solved with a phone call and a check. But tonight, she was just a woman stranded on the side of the road. Headlights appeared in the distance. She straightened, hopeful. A small, old scooter came into view, its engine sputtering as it slowed near her. The rider, a thin boy, no older than 17, pulled over and lifted his helmet. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, his voice gentle. Victoria blinked, surprised. "I have a flat tire," she said, trying to sound composed. "I'm waiting for assistance." The boy glanced at the tire, then back at her. "There's no signal here. It might take hours." "I'm aware," she replied, a hint of irritation slipping through. The boy hesitated, then said, "I can fix it." Victoria almost laughed. His clothes were worn, his scooter barely holding together, and yet he spoke with quiet confidence. "You?" she asked skeptically. He nodded. "I work at a garage in town. I've changed hundreds of tires." She looked around. The rain was getting heavier. Darkness was settling in. "Fine," she said at last. "Go ahead." The boy smiled softly and set to work without another word. He didn't rush. Every movement was careful, precise. Despite the rain soaking his clothes, he focused completely on the task. Victoria watched him, her irritation slowly fading into curiosity. "What's your name?" she asked after a moment. "Samir," he replied, tightening a bolt. "And you just stop to help strangers on highways?" He shrugged. "If someone needs help, I help. Simple, honest." Within 15 minutes, the tire was replaced. Samir stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You're good to go." Victoria checked the tire, surprised. It was done perfectly. She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. "Thank you," she said, offering him several large bills. "This should cover your time." Samir looked at the money, but didn't take it. "You don't have to pay me," he said. Victoria frowned. "Excuse me, I mean it," he said. "You looked like you needed help. That's all." She stared at him, unsure whether to feel impressed or offended. "Do you even realize how much this is?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, ma'am, that's why I can't take it." "Why not?" "Because if I start helping people for money, it won't feel the same." For a moment, the rain and the highway seemed to disappear. Victoria had spent her entire life in a world where everything had a price. And here stood a boy who refused money, not out of pride, but out of principle. "Then at least tell me how I can repay you," she insisted. Samir thought for a moment. "If you really want to repay me," he said slowly, "help someone who needs it. Not because you have to, just because you can." Victoria said nothing. Samir picked up his tools, put on his helmet, and climbed back onto his scooter. "Drive safe," he said. And then he was gone. Victoria sat in her car for a long time before driving away. His words echoed in her mind. Help someone who needs it. It sounded so simple, too simple, but something about it stayed with her. The next morning, Victoria returned to her office, a towering building of glass and steel. Meetings, deals, and numbers filled her day, just like always. But she couldn't focus. At lunch, she stared out the window at the city below. People rushing, struggling, living. For the first time in years, she wondered, when was the last time I helped someone, without expecting anything in return? She didn't have an answer. That evening, instead of going home, Victoria gave her driver a different address. "Take me to the east side," she said. "The east side, ma'am?" he asked, surprised. "It's not a very—" "I know," she interrupted. "Just go." The car stopped in a modest neighborhood. Small houses, narrow streets, life stripped of luxury, but full of quiet resilience. Victoria stepped out. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for. Then she saw it, a small garage with a flickering sign. And there, under the dim light, was Samir. He was working on an old car, his hands covered in grease, completely focused. Victoria approached slowly. "Busy?" she asked. Samir looked up, and froze. "You," he said, shocked. She smiled slightly. I told you I might repay you. He laughed nervously. You didn't have to come all this way. I didn't, she said. I wanted to. She looked around the garage. It was small, barely holding together. The tools were old. The roof leaked slightly. This is where you work? She asked. Yes, ma'am, and you're okay with this? He shrugged. It's honest work. She studied him for a moment. Do you own this place? No, he said. I just work here after school. After school. Victoria's expression softened. You're still studying? I want to become an engineer someday, he said, a hint of hope in his voice. Maybe build cars instead of fixing them. Why don't you? She asked. He hesitated. Money, he admitted. Of course. Victoria took a slow breath. Samir, she said, what if I told you I could help you? He looked at her, confused. Help me. Your education, she said. Your future. He shook his head immediately. No, ma'am, I can't accept that. Why not? She asked gently. Because it's too much, he said. I helped you with a tire. That doesn't mean. It means more than you think, she interrupted softly. He fell silent. Victoria stepped closer. You reminded me of something I forgot, she said. Kindness. Real kindness. The kind that doesn't expect anything back. She paused. Let me do the same. Samir looked down, struggling. I don't want to feel like I owe you, he said quietly. Victoria smiled. Then don't, she said. Consider it, me keeping a promise. He looked up. What promise? The one you gave me, she said. Help someone who needs it. Samir's eyes filled with emotion. You'd really do that? He asked. Yes, she said, but only if you promise me something. What? When you become successful, you do the same for someone else. He nodded slowly. I promise. Months passed. Samir enrolled in a top engineering program, fully funded. He worked harder than ever, determined not to waste the opportunity. Victoria, meanwhile, began to change. She started small, helping employees, supporting local communities, funding education programs. But she didn't do it for recognition. She did it because of a boy who refused her money on a rainy night. Years later, a grand event was held in the city, a celebration of innovation and young talent. Victoria sat in the front row as a young man walked onto the stage. Confident, proud, Samir, none of this would have been possible, he said into the microphone, without someone who believed in me, and reminded me that kindness can change lives. He looked at Victoria. She smiled, her eyes shining. And today, he continued, I'm starting a foundation to help students like me achieve their dreams. The audience erupted in applause. Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not power, not success, but something far greater, purpose. As the event ended, Samir approached her. You kept your promise, he said. She shook her head gently. No, she said. You did. They stood there for a moment, smiling. 2 lives, 1 small act of kindness. And a ripple that changed everything. Dizzy 1500 Watt.